I love our opening theme song.
I love our opening theme. And look, I love Tim's advertisement. Vote.
Yes.
This is great.
I really don't wear masks that much anymore, but I've been wearing this all over town just to remind people.
I love that. Are you an anti-masker now, Tim? I'm just joking.
I've always been very responsible in wearing masks, and now I've taken them off, and it's hard to put them back on.
Yeah,
but again, this was a gift. It was made by our dear friend Sue.
I love this. Great.
Hi, Stutzman from GX Design.
Sue's GX Design. Yep. Also Tucker GX, which is her Chihuahua. We're all Chihuahua people.
Yes.
Oh my God. Speaking of
welcome to If These Walls Could Talk.
God, my brain got ahead of me. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. Speaking of Chihuahua people.
Well, anyway, that's Wendy Stuart and I'm Tym Moss.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I have a Chihuahua named Nugget. But I digress. So I'm so glad you mentioned Sue's because it made me think of Chihuahuas.
Yeah.
And I have to throw this out there. Friday night was the amazing Dorothy Bishop show at the Triad. It's called A Dozen Divas.
Yes.
She is, I get it. First of all, her Chihuahua.
Luther.
He's not nice. But he loves Dorothy.
Yes.
And
he loves his Uncle Tim too.
He loves Uncle Tim. Well, he was also, I saw wonderful pictures of Luther in the lap of the wonderful performer Margot Channing at the after party. Luther, maybe it's me Luther doesn't like. I don't know.
No, he doesn't like most people.
Luther doesn't like most people. But
Did he growl? Did he do that?
Yeah, he does. He shows his teeth. Yeah. And I had a Chihuahua that used to do that. Mr. Fudge didn't love Mama at all. I would say, give Mama a kiss. And I would hold him up here and you'd see him. He wouldn't bite my face, but you'd see. Of course, then the universe now rewarded me with Nugget, who's like a Velcro. Yeah. He's totally attached to Mama. But where was I going with this? Dorothy Bishop is called Chihuahuas and Dorothy Bishop show at the Triad. She's going to be doing another one in December. The Dozen Divas show, she's brilliant.
She actually does at least 12 divas on stage in front of you, changing in front of you, and
complete persona. She does. She did Elvira.
Her Halloween show, right?
It was a Halloween show. Many
Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks was absolutely brilliant, and I could actually go on down the list, and then. Her Dame Edna. What is that performer's name?
Oh gosh, I don't know. And I've seen
Walter, him. Michael Walter, or something like that.
I've seen him, but I've not seen his Dame Edna, and I heard it was brilliant.
Dame Edna, like what you cannot even imagine. I mean, first of all, I have a couple of cocktails. I'm sitting next to some friends, and I said, "Oh wow, this is great that Dorothy was able to get Dame Edna to come down here to do this show with her." That's how good he was. Okay. I was totally and completely convinced about it. So,
and I was doing my show, It's Complicated, at the Producers Club this weekend, which went very well. We closed on Sunday. It was absolutely fabulous.
What did they call it? It's Complicated.
Well, it was a series of like 5 short plays. I was in 2 of the 5 plays. And it was very, very good. Very fun. And it was a wonderful time. And I left Friday night at intermission because I went down to perform in the East Village at Jackie Dupree's show, which was also very fun. So
and I'm not being rude. I'm texting my wonderful guest for today, who's backstage. But Halloween. I'm still talking about Halloween. Yes. Halloween was. So what were you? Were you a costume?
Honey, I am always a costume. I was telling somebody that being an entertainer, and I'm always running around all year long, carrying my costume bags from this show to that show. Excuse me.
Don't crack up a furball on me. That's here on.
And so usually on Halloween, I take the night off. I let the rest of the world dress up in costumes and all of that. So no, I didn't. Well, I did when I did Jackie's show. I did Hunchback of Notre Dame.
You had a hunchback, right?
So I had my hunchback outfit on, and then I changed into something else. And I don't remember what
I was 2 nights in a row, just different kinds of ferries. One was a dark forest ferry on Friday night for Dorothy Bishop. And then Saturday night, I was at a huge party. I was like a ferry of spring and light. The problem was the wings at that party. They were wonderful. They were green and they stuck up. Well, there were some people at the party that didn't think those wings were very good because every time they went to stuff their faces at the buffet, say, if I was there and turned around, they almost got a wing in an eye. So you know what? These things happen. People need to have a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
For Halloween.
Especially when you get a fairy's wing in your eye.
A fairy wing in the eye is worth two in the bush. I didn't say that. I'm so sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, I'm getting very excited. Yes.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tym Moss. And we are going to be coming back very soon with our incredible guest, Shannon Kring. I hope I said that last name correctly.
Kring. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Take it away, Wendy. So this extraordinary woman I had been hearing about from a mutual friend of ours, a mover and shaker, Skip Mueller, who is a screenwriter, an entrepreneur, just one of those people that networks so well. Everybody who he introduces to each other, they end up some way, somehow working together. He just has that kind of magic. He's an exceptional human being. And he had been telling me about his friend Shannon, her Emmy Awards, the documentaries, the writing. And I was fortunate enough to go to a post-Emmy party for their film, End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock. And I was thrilled to meet Shannon in person. But what was most thrilling to me at this dinner was one of the key players in the film. And I want to talk to Shannon more about that. A woman from the Lakota tribe got up and made a speech, which I actually videotaped. It was so impressive, every single thing that she said. And she really brought to light, as Shannon does, exactly what has happened to Native Americans in this country and what is happening. For those of you who may have forgotten, we are here to remind you that Standing Rock, was the threat to the clean water and sacred ancestral lands of Native Americans, and they were going to develop that land and put a pipeline through it like it didn't even matter. Once again, what has happened to Native Americans in this country is disgraceful. And we keep saying, oh, we're going to make reparations. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then they're going to put an oil pipeline through there. Well, I think one of the most extraordinary things to me was the women that said, this is the end of the line. Not going to happen anymore. So I am going to bring our amazing guest on to tell you more about it. Let's welcome Shannon Kring.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
I hope my audio is okay for you. Can you hear me?
Your audio just went on. It's all good.
Perfect, just like you. Hello, gorgeous.
Well, thank you both for having me on.
Well, it's really incredible to have you here. I am so impressed, not only with your film, but with you as a person. I read a bio of somebody that is a complete humanitarian, and every aspect of who you are creatively comes out in your work of giving voice to the voiceless.
Thank you. Thanks
very
much.
Shannon, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really want to start in the very beginning with you, because I know snippets about you, but how has all of this evolved for you? We talk about people becoming woke. How is it that you are so woke, and where did it all start?
I actually, I think I was born woke, and I was certainly born in the right community to do the work that I do. I originally come from the North Woods of Wisconsin, which is Ochechichakoi is what the...
Say that again. Can you say that again for me? Thank you.
Ochechichakoi. And that means the lands of the 7 council fires of the Great Sioux Nation.
Wow.
At one time, that part of the country, the middle of the country, the Great Plains, the upper Midwest, all of that was part of the Great Sioux Nation. And so when I was growing up, there were still and are still a number of reservations in that area. And for viewers who might not be familiar, our government decided to relocate Native Americans, take them from their ancestral lands and put them on reservations in various places. Sometimes that meant that someone from Alaska ended up in Florida, or someone from Seattle ended up in Cleveland, and so on. And so this was in the 1800s, and it happened and still happens that people are relocated. And so when I was growing up, the major issue at that time, when I started having a consciousness of what was going on, was spearfishing. And natives, the Ojibwa, who were up the closest people who were to where I lived on the Lac de Flambeau Reservation and other reservations around, they would spearfish, meaning they would catch fish in the traditional way, which is actually with a stick and spearing them. And there were a lot of problems at that time where white people in the community were really upset with that. And they said that, they shouldn't be allowed to spear, and they should have to hunt when we do and do it the way we do, not using bow and arrows out of season, sort of thing. And so I saw a lot of violence and nastiness.
Oh my goodness.
People in my own family who are Native and who look very Native, I saw how they were treated completely differently than those of us who look like I do. And so I always had a consciousness of that. I happened to have parents who were very active in different causes, and I was mortified at the time.
They were for good causes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you grew up
wonderful.
But at the time, I was made fun of sometimes. I can remember, being on the school bus at that time and someone saying something about how, my dad got in a bar fight because somebody went after an effing Indian, and those things at the time embarrassed me. And now, of course, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I grew up in a household where I knew the names Russell Means and Crow Dog and names going back very far. And I find it so incredible, amazing that my own trajectory led me, after living out of the country and in many different places across the country, ended up leading me to Standing Rock. And even before then, led me to doing interviews with amazing Indigenous luminaries throughout the U.S., such as doing the last interview of Russell Means, the great Russell Means, who some people may know as the incredible activist that he was and co-founder of American Indian Movement. Other people know him from being an actor, being an artist. He was on things like Curb Your Enthusiasm and Last of the Mohicans and all of this. But
he changed your entire trajectory.
He really did. And maybe I was always on the trajectory.
Maybe you were,
That's what I probably say I always was. But it changed the course of my work in a very abrupt way to be asked, would you like to do the last interview of Russell Means? And honestly, when that call came in, I thought that it was a joke. I was like, yeah, right. Of course, I'd like to do that. Thanks. And I was actually in the shower at the time, and this call kept coming in over and over from the same number. And so I leaned out and took the call. And so it turns out that was real. And I ended up doing the interview of Russ toward the end of his life. And I met Pearl Daniel Means there, who became my dearest,
his amazing wife.
She became my dearest friend. My exchange with Russell off camera, especially, but on camera also, but my exchange with him changed everything. I don't want to talk about that. I don't talk about that. I agreed to all of those things. But when Standing Rock, these pipeline protests happened, and they began on April 1st of 2016, I was living and working in Latin America, in Honduras.
In Honduras, right.
Yeah. And it was... I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
It's dangerous cities, correct?
I was living in at the time, it was the murder capital of the world, San Pedro Sula.
Yeah.
It was a really, in itself, a really, really tough position to be in, to be living there and to be.
What was a nice girl like you doing in a place like that?
Honestly, I was doing humanitarian work and I was doing documentary work.
Yeah.
I worked in a very quiet way. I've been working in Honduras since 2007, and I lived there full time on and off. At that point, I was living there about 2 years, I believe, full time. And my work was always very quiet in Honduras, except for I did advise the government, and I advised presidents as they were there. That was public. My work there evolved over time. And eventually it was the Indigenous people there who woke me up to the fact that if I was involved with something and I was giving a speech or whatever it was, the cameras would come. And I'll never forget this little Indigenous woman who said to me, it's your job to take the attention that you get and to shine it on us.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
And so at that point, I became much more public with my work in Honduras. And I happened to be dealing with a story at that time, numerous stories, but one of those stories was about land abuse and use, and a very similar story to Standing Rock.
Wow.
And so I was so immersed in that and telling another story that was really dangerous and really all-consuming. But it was actually my parents again who really kind of intervened. They, of course, as any parents would be, didn't understand, first of all, but they really didn't like my being in Latin America doing the type of work that I was doing at that time.
It was very dangerous.
Absolutely. And so it was eventually then they kept sending me links. The great Myron Dewey, my dear brother, who's now, as they call it, the Star Camps, he passed away. And Myron was really the first who started putting word out in a public way of what was happening at Standing Rock, who was documenting it by drone and by doing Facebook Lives and all of that. But my parents were watching that, and they were watching Amy Goodman, who was the first serious journalist, a white journalist who started covering the story for Democracy Now! And eventually, it was one day in particular where I was in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. I had just had 2 meetings with 2 different Indigenous groups there. I was very emotional at the time because of things in my personal life. I had just had a late-term miscarriage, and I was very emotional. And it was
sorry.
Thank you. It was a very transformational time in my life.
Wow.
And my dad, through my mom, sent the message, what are you still doing there when this is happening in your own backyard in the US? Mm-hmm. And it's time to come home. And I won't get into the whole story, but I got the message loud and clear.
Of course.
Yeah.
I had a dream the night prior, actually. A dream where Russell Means came into the dream. And it wasn't unusual that I had dreams about Russell, and the Lakota believe fully that these are not dreams, that they were messages from the beyond. And whatever they were, I had already been thinking about it. And I made the decision to go. And 24 hours later, Pearl and I were on the ground at Standing Rock.
Wow.
Incredible.
And I started documenting that story. And at the same time that we were working on that and trying to crowdfund that, because nobody wanted to give us money in those early days.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Internet, people literally were saying things like, oh, these Indians need to get over it. What happened to them hundreds of years ago? Or they're still alive, or all of the ignorance. Or,
excuse me, you were going against the quote unquote white ranchers. Mm-hmm. Forget it. Not a chance. Nobody cared. But
right.
Look what happened.
Now, firstly, I just need to say for a commercial break, thank you for tuning into If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tym Moss, and our amazing and incredible guest,
story,
Shannon Kring. So please continue.
Yes. So yes, it's I had not been to Standing Rock before. I've been to, now when I had to count recently for something, I've been to about 3/4 of the reservations in the United States, which is mind-boggling. And I didn't realize it until I had to assign an approximation on it recently for a project that I was working on. I had never been to Standing Rock. I certainly had already had a good amount of contact with the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota in that area, but I'd never met Phyllis Young, who is the sister of Russell Means. And that's Phyllis who gave the speech the night of the Emmys.
Completely. I'm going to play that for you when we're done. Unbelievable. That speech made me cry. But what the key word, we are of a different time and space. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't nail it, I don't know what does. Okay. The fact that, as you said, Russell contacted you in dreams. I've spent a lot of time with different Indigenous groups, and I'm definitely on point with you there. I don't know why I'm there. I don't have any 1 ounce of Native American blood in me, but there's some reason that I have to tell the story. And there was a reason I needed to meet you. Go on, please.
Well, I'm so grateful of that. that you are willing and doing the work of helping get this word out. It's so important. And that's all anyone has to do is do whatever they can, I believe. And it looks different for everybody, but
it is different for everyone.
When I had that dream about Russell, by the way, the same day that I had the dream, Pearl, Daniel Means, his widow, got struck by lightning in the stomach.
Oh my God.
And Russell said, and this was very public, he said this in many interviews, and he said it personally to those of us who knew him. I'll come back as lightning. I'm going to come back as lightning. I'm going to strike the White House. That did happen. That's the funny thing, that did happen at one point. But he said, I'm always going to come back as lightning. So I didn't know, because I didn't talk to Pearl that day. I didn't know that she'd been struck by lightning. She, of course, didn't know that later that night I'd had this dream.
Amazing.
And so when I called her and said, are we going to Standing Rock? She said, did Russell come to you too? and so when we did Standing Rock, when we arrived at Standing Rock, the funny thing is another of his Hunka, or adopted in the Lakota tradition, sisters had said to me, when she met me, she just was like looking at me like, what the hell are you doing here? And Pearl introduced me and how I'm connected to the family. And she said, and this woman said to me, she goes, oh, so you got a Russell memo too. Russell came to you as well. And I never did, talk to her about what that was on her end or whatever. But anyway, Russell and the Lakota and many other people call it the Great Mystery. Sometimes they call it creator, but I do like this term that Russell himself uses, the Great Mystery. We don't know what's beyond this world necessarily. We can think we know, we can feel it, we can guess, whatever. It is a mystery. Whatever mysteries, or mystery, great mystery, whatever it was that brought me to Standing Rock, I consider it my greatest honor in my life. And it'll always be the greatest honor in my life to meet the direct descendants of people who understood hundreds of years ago what we still, as a collective, as a planet, still haven't figured out. And it was always believed by Indigenous people. And I know this from my other projects, and I've known this for many years to varying degrees, that there was a belief by many people that one day the planet would find itself in a place where we as the collective would need to go back to the ways and the teachings of the Indigenous inhabitants of this world. And to be honest with you, when I started documenting that particular story, which was in 2009 or 2010, I didn't know what to make of that. And to be very honest, I had my doubts. I was like, yeah, right. There are all these prophecies. And I talked to people from New Zealand and Australia and the north of Finland and Russia and Mongolia. And they were all saying the same things, which was that in this particular time, there were prophecies of their people that said sometime between 2012-ish and 2026. Mm-hmm. And I documented, I believe, 34 different stories like this, many stories, but I mean 34 different peoples who told me, and sometimes dozens of people in each of these.
It's the same story.
And this was global.
Yeah, it was a global movement. You have to say to yourself, so I know the pandemic totally fit into this. Mm-hmm. That it's the only way it can be explained.
Yes.
All right. And the connection of Indigenous people to the land, to the wind, to the earth, to the sky. And as Russell said to you, you don't have to know exactly what it is, but you know what? It is as much fact, I believe, as science is. Absolutely. And I have argued this point with scientists many times that come to the Explorers Club, because there's no explanation for the knowing of what's out there, and these people know, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world.
They tune in.
Right, they can tune in.
Now, once again, thank you for tuning into If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tym Moss, and our amazing, wonderful guest, the fabulous Shannon Kring.
Yay!
I have got so many questions for
you.
But one being, so you were exposed to Native American while you were growing up,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
And the thinking, because the Native American, from my understanding, observation, and out of respect, are of nature.
Yes.
They are very tuned in to the world and beyond, and they also hold things sacred.
Yes.
Yes.
And then in comes this society that has grown into basically the worship of money.
Yes.
Where everything is for sale. I want to buy it. I
Right.
want to sell it. I want to do this. I want to do that, and have no respect for like the sacred lands or sacred spaces. And we're seeing the result of this basically.
But I also think it's not just the money. It's a form of colonialism, or
that's what
or supremacy, and
and a lack of respect,
a total lack of respect
for nature, for the very nature that
right.
the indigenous people worship or
and the culture.
And
the culture.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm just trying to figure out how can these two polar opposites come together to blend together.
Well, the great thing right now, and there's so much that we can be really fearful about right now, angry about, and all of those things are valid. There's also great hope. And I'll tell you that one of the things that I find hope in is the youth of today, who are so much braver, who are so much more educated about these things. And I'm not just talking the Indigenous youth. There are great collaborations happening between Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth the world over. Another thing that gives me so much hope is that science and spirituality, which is how the world chooses to see these things and see them as dual, and they're actually not. It's not really a duality. It is coming together. There are incredible scientists who are Indigenous and who are bringing that into that world.
That's what has to happen.
Unbelievably brilliant scientists and researchers that are collaborating with Indigenous people in various areas, such as cosmology, epigraphy, deciphering these old documents, these old temples, tombs, stela, where the original words came from, and trying to help decipher that. There are scientists going to Indigenous lands and helping with their resources to help Indigenous people reclaim their food ways, their various ways, and to help with energy, for instance. There are amazing collaborations happening now. Young of Standing Rock, who was, she calls herself the collaborator, the co-collaborator or collaborator of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. She was the leader of it in my eyes. We went to MIT back in 2017 when Standing Rock was honored with something called the Disobedience Award at MIT.
Oh, I love it.
It's in our film. It's in End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock, which you can see on Fuse. You can see that on Peacock and various other places. But it's part of the narrative of the film. When we went to MIT, what is not in the film is Phyllis on stage when they accepted their award, and it was LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, who has passed as well in 2021. But it was LaDonna and it was Phyllis, the two people who led the two biggest camps of protest out at the peaceful protests at Standing Rock. They gave the most impassioned, amazing speeches, and we put a little bit of that in the film. But at one point, Phyllis said on stage, "And I challenge you to come to Standing Rock," and basically said, "You will work with us on solar energy, and you will work with us." Sure enough, she held this one woman in the audience, who's this amazing woman named Megan Smith, who was, I believe, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but she was like Google hire number 5 or 6 or something. She's an amazing scientist and an outstanding human being. And I've been lucky to know her in a few different capacities over the years. And, Megan accepted that challenge from the audience during this. And MIT did go there, and Megan herself personally went there. And there is a collaboration between MIT, between Standing Rock, the scientists, the holy people, and this is happening across the country, but it's not happening enough.
Right.
And so part of the work that I do is shining a light on what is happening and what needs to happen. And that's not my decision, by the way, to decide what is it that needs to happen.
Right.
For me personally, speaking just personally, other people may have different beliefs for themselves. I believe my job as someone who is born with this exterior, I was born with privileges,
Right.
Yes.
and rights that these people who sit before my cameras, that I am so honored to have them sit before my camera, but even more honored to be in their homes and their sacred ceremonies and just to know them.
Amazing. It's amazing.
My personal job is to become as clear of a channel as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right.
To allow myself to be used for what needs to happen and to be guided in a way that allows me to give what I can give in service, in humility, to do what I can. And I can do only what I can, but I will do everything that I can. And so, yeah, my job right now, at least, is twofold, is to work as an emissary between people who have power,
right,
and people who have really none, in a way that's tangible in this mindset of the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do mediation work, I do connection work, I do, it's really like an emissary is the best way that I can think of to call it, because there's really not a name for that work that I do. Humanitarian, yes, I'm a humanitarian. That doesn't quite fit what I do.
Right.
Documentarian, and I've always documented everything since I was a small child. And so I document it, and I consider that a great honor and a responsibility. And, I do the best I can every day, which is the best I can do is the best I can do.
Absolutely.
You are what we call a global connector. And you're doing it through your writing. You're doing it through your documentaries. And of course, I don't have to tell you the irony of this. There was not a plan that was laid out where you said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You have become the chosen and evolved into the work that you're supposed to be doing.
Well, you were guided into it. And you are given a voice to people who have had no voice.
Yes. And I also want to be, and that is true. And I also want to be very clear on something, because I've not been as precise as I could be about this, about giving voice to the voiceless. I hear that a lot, and I'm introduced that way a lot. And I know it comes from a good way. And that is in essence what I do.
Oh, but those women are so strong. My God. It's like
they have a voice. They have a voice.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that they don't necessarily, in all cases, and then sadly in most cases, they don't have a way to get that voice heard.
Exactly.
So their voice is loud and clear. Their voice is heard by their people. Their voice is heard by someone I believe higher than all of us. They have a voice. The issue is that for too long, the powers that be have not listened. And here's where I think things are changing today is we're forced to listen. No matter what your spiritual beliefs are, no matter what you think about things like climate change and social justice and all of that, these have become the polarizing and polarized topics and beliefs. No matter what, I think we can all agree, no matter where we are on any of the spectrums, is I think we can agree that the world is changing and that we're facing some unprecedented things, such as unprecedented storms, unprecedented global things, because the world is smaller, right? So the pandemic, we've had pandemics before. There will probably be pandemics again. But now our world is more connected. Our world has always been connected. I believe it was Chief Seattle who said everything is connected. What we do to one another, and I'm saying this paraphrasing in a much worse way, but what we do to ourselves, we do to each other. What we do to our other, we do to the world.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I was taught out at Standing Rock along those lines, and I had never heard this until I was at Standing Rock, and it hit me. It hit me like lightning. And that was one of the women of Standing Rock said to me, what we do to women, we do to Mother Earth.
Yep.
Yes.
What we do to Mother Earth, we do to women.
Absolutely.
And so something like a pipeline to the people, the indigenous people who began and are still fighting this pipeline that now is pumping oil underneath their lands and in their water, because the pipeline is actually it actually runs through their waterways. So when it does inevitably have a leak or a burst,
right, there is always that chance.
It'll be in their water and in their land, and probably before anyone realizes it, it'll be affecting them. But you know, to them, it was, you're digging up the guts of our mother.
Right.
In some traditions,
exactly right.
We're digging up her guts. And so to them, those backhoes, those big pieces of equipment, all of them, they viewed it as entrails, that we were digging up the guts of the great mother. And to them, that was a huge violation. Of course, another violation out at Standing Rock was that they were actually digging up graves of their ancestors. And literally, the bones of their ancestors were being exposed to the elements, and by the way, and I won't get into the whole story of that, that was deliberate.
Wow.
Because the tribe filed saying the pipeline's about to go through our sacred sites.
So they said where the people were buried.
Now it's about to go through where some of our great leaders are buried.
And they did it anyway.
Well, not only did they do it, they moved the pipeline miles, and they did it on a holiday weekend when they weren't even working, which was Labor Day weekend. It was a deliberate act.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Intentionally. Wow. And these types of intentional things, by the way, happen around the world.
That is,
the colonizer is still alive and well. And
that is so
Shannon,
highly disrespectful.
I can only tell you, I was in the Omo Valley in Ethiopia. It's the same story. They wanted to put a dam through there, and it was going into Egypt. So the Omo River, they started moving people off of their ancestral lands, digging and moving tribes next to each other that were very different from each other. When we got there, everyone was armed. They had AK-47s. And people said to me, how can you go and shoot in an area like that? I'm like, they're not going to shoot me. They have AK-47s because they're fearful of the government. They're fearful of being who's put next door to them. It's like the Hatfields and McCoys. But you know what? You have underlined a problem that is happening all over the world. Absolutely. And by creating a film like you did, you are raising awareness. Absolutely. I'm a strong believer in that. I would love to show the trailer now.
Well,
you have to do station identification.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tym Moss, and our wonderful, incredible guest, Shannon Kring. Now, I would just like to say, again, I know the term isn't quite right of giving a voice to the voiceless, because they do have a voice.
Oh my God!
But you are giving them a platform, a level of platform that they did not have available to them. Now, some of like your documentaries have been presented by dozens of governments, including the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, the Smithsonian Institution Museum of American Indian, NASA, MIT, the British Museum, and on and on. I mean, these are, thank you so very much for what you're doing. Now, we would like to take this time to show the trailer from this incredible film that we highly encourage everyone to watch.
For years, people have fought this struggle, fought for our land and water. And I was at a point where I felt like nobody cared. We're just people from here that stood up and asked everybody to come and stand with us. And they did.
Criminals! You guys are criminals! The original pipeline was to go through North Dakota, but it was going through white people's land. So they redirected it, put it through the Indians.
What it all comes down to is wanting clean drinking water for our children.
One family. If we don't stand, who will?
and we're peaceful, prayerful people. But it's come to a point now where enough is enough.
Love is the strongest.
The world is run by corporations now. Who's kidding who? Democracy.
Our prayers would not be needed. Indigenous wisdom unheeded and sacred things depleted.
Are you telling the dogs to bite the protesters?
What is a fossil fuel? Continued destruction, nothing new.
I hear the rubber bullet. I see this one just coming straight for my eye.
Taking our children, shifting their feelings till nothing's true.
How many people know that the United States didn't allow us to raise our own families? We won that right in 1985.
They just put the fear in us so bad with hell and with that belt and with abuse. They'd come after you at night and take you someplace and made you do things you didn't want to do. And you thought it was your fault.
So when people ask, why is this the end of the line? Why are women standing up and saying, no, this is it?
Water is life!
Because they've seen this happen to their children before.
We're disconnected. These times are hectic and feeling.
The earth is not something we pollute, we take advantage of, that we rape. The earth is our mother.
That's why we walk with prayer. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be standing here.
Nobody thought any politician would have the guts. And I just closed my eyes and said, do it.
Have no fear.
We're still going to pursue the legal avenues. I have to leave a footprint.
People, hold your ground. Change is coming now.
The rhetoric is over. It's time for action.
Wow. Yes. Powerful, powerful, powerful. Well, we are coming to the end of the broadcast for UBC TV, but please stick around. Now, how can people find out more about the film and about you, Shannon Kring?
Go on endofthelinefilm.com, endofthelinefilm.com. We have a Facebook page that is End of the Line Film. Facebook has been a tough one for us. We get shut down pretty frequently. All of my pages do. And so sometimes things are feeding, sometimes not. Right now, I personally cannot access the page, but there are other moderators who can. And that's because of another one of my projects was deemed, I can't remember what it said, like I'm trying to influence
standards or something.
Censorship, censored. They're censoring you.
So that's typical for me personally. It is such a pain in the you know what. And at the same time, it tells me always when I start getting shut down or shadow banned or things are locked, I'm like,
you're on the right track.
So that's one place. If people would like to learn more about the current status of the pipeline, I would encourage them to go to Lakota People's Law Project's website, which is lakotalaw.org, and they can learn about what's happening with the pipeline now because it's still being fought. It's still in the court system. My website is very outdated, shannonkring.com. You could go to the Vimeo page for Red Queen Media, which is, I believe, vimeo.com/Red Queen Media, or just do a search on that because we have a lot of videos that live there. Also on Facebook when that page is working, where you can see the progress of what we were doing in terms of videos, because we ended up having to crowdfund it initially. We had to do all kinds of strange things to make the film work. To be here now, this many years later, after every door was slammed in our face for 6 years, it's amazing. We won the Hollywood Critics Association Award. Yes. We took runner-up at the UK's most prestigious journalism awards. We were nominated for a national Emmy. I got nominated for something called the Humanitas Prize, which is like the highest screenwriting honor in this town. And so many more. We got so many more amazing recognitions. And, it was really hard to get this film made. Stick it out. And yet,
and an Emmy nomination.
Yes, national Emmy nomination. So these things don't usually happen for films like ours. They don't happen without any marketing dollars or impact campaigns or any of that. This has happened because behind this film and in front of the camera on this film, these are people who are so resilient that a no or a racist comment or even a death threat, and we had all of those throughout the making of this film. None of that is anything
in the way.
These extraordinary souls who are in front of and behind the cameras on this. And so, but we are just really grateful because the more people tune into Peacock to watch the film, or who go on to Fuse Plus to watch the film. We're no longer airing, or at least at this time, I don't believe, on Al Jazeera English in the US. We're airing in various places throughout Europe and Asia as well. But you know, the more people that tune in and learn these truths, this film is about way more than a pipeline, as you may have been able to see from the trailer. You know, and it's a small fraction of what we filmed. It's a small fraction of what can be told, but it's a great introduction to the resilience of the Indigenous people. And in this case, the women. Why the women? Because women are the backbone of this movement, and women are the guardians and the protectors of water, because they carry within their bodies life in water. And
water is life.
Are in charge of the water, and the men are the protectors and the helpers of the women in this type of an effort where water is concerned. And so I'm really honored to know these extraordinary people. I think everyone should know their stories. And I'm really grateful to people such as the two of you who give us the time to talk about these important issues. They might not be fun. They might not be sexy. Genocide's not sexy.
Thank you. Thank you. And people need to take their heads out of the sand. This has started in 2016. It was on the news for more weeks than most things are on the news. But you know what? If your film weren't out there on Fuse and on Peacock and in getting nominated for an Emmy Award, all right, the light that you are shining would not be there. You're shining it.
Well, thank you for that. And also these incredible men and women and children, Indigenous of Turtle Island, as this North America is called, what they are doing, what they continue to do, and the sacrifices that they continue to make. And some of them have made the ultimate sacrifice by being out at a camp where they were being sprayed with chemicals and being shot.
Rubber bullets, dogs, water
and other kinds of bullets and other kinds of weapons and all kinds of things. They're still going. They will still be going. And it's just important that those of us who have not, by privilege of our births, have not had those same experiences, but can in some way, like you, Wendy, who for whatever reason feel that it resonates. What can you do? You don't need to go out and you don't need to hold up a sign, but if you want to do that, then you can do that. You don't have to give money, but if you have the ability to give money, then give money to causes that are good causes and good people doing the good work. Do what you can. The most important thing you can do is just learn about the history and the ongoing cultural genocide and other types of genocide that are being inflicted upon Indigenous people all over the world. But let's say, let's look at North America right now as we have this Native Peoples Month right now. You know, let's not just pay a day or a month to looking at these issues. Let's be honest and let's look at the tough issues. Let's look at what Thanksgiving, let's say, mean.
You just called it out on that one. What does it really mean exactly?
Thanks-taking is what most people call it.
No thanks-taking, actually.
And you know, I'll hear, that's a whole other topic, but I'll hear, and I used to be one of those people. Okay, but I look at it as a day to have gratitude and as a day to, actually, I no longer acknowledge Thanksgiving at all anymore. Because it represents a complete lie. And I would be a liar and a hypocrite if I were even taking that day to have a meal and to be grateful on that day. I'm grateful every day now because I've been taught to be grateful and I've been humbled into being grateful. And, you know, I'm not comfortable with a lot of things that even I, growing up in an educated way to it, even I was ignorant, and I'm still ignorant to a lot of things, but I do what I can to acknowledge
do what you can.
And so read books. I'd be happy to educate people. If people want to contact me through my website, I'd be happy to send resources. There are some resources on our endofthelinefilm.com website. Watch this film. You can bring this film into your school, into your organization, into your company, and these extraordinary women will even come in person, or we do panels. You need to hear it firsthand from them. I'm just a filmmaker who was willing to do and continue and get out this film no matter what.
No matter what.
Absolutely.
But, you know, this isn't really about me. And normally, by the way, I have one of my sisters or mothers alongside me, but we actually had a very significant death. And so my Lala Lakota Hunka mother, Lula Red Cloud, we had her homegoing services this weekend.
And I'm sorry. I know how you tried to get to us while that was going on.
So she was the great granddaughter of Red Cloud, great Chief Red Cloud, and many other greats. Wow. And so Lula, who was involved in this film and whose story ended up too big to be in this film, who was nonetheless there every step of the way. We had her ceremonies. Actually cut off my hair, which is a sign of respect.
Oh my gosh, you did, because
like that much.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really long when I.
Yeah. Anyway, it's so we're all grieving and we're all doing what is protocol and what is necessary and required. And though I am adopted by the Oglala and also by the Hunkpapa, Phyllis is also one of my Hunka mothers. We're doing what we can on days when we can in the best way that we can. And so normally, though I've been adopted and therefore I'm allowed to be doing interviews like this myself, I still always prefer when we do have one of the actual women of Standing Rock, somebody who is Indigenous, though I was out there and I'm also a woman of Standing Rock. Anyway, I'm usually most comfortable that way. But today, because of how things worked, it didn't work that way. And it's all good and it's all approved and it's all wonderful. And I'm grateful to all of you for doing things the way you did today and for honoring these extraordinary souls who deserve to be honored in ways far beyond a film.
Well, we are so grateful that you did take the time to come to see us, and again, our condolences to you for your recent loss and the suffering that you and the whole family, the tribe, whatever the terminology would be, everyone that we're sending our love and light
very much
to all of you.
Right, and our gratitude,
absolutely,
to have you here under such circumstances.
Now, tell us about the women, the role of the women, and what you decided to highlight in this.
Well, when I initially went out to Standing Rock, in my head as I was on the plane, I was thinking like, I'm going to tell every side of the story and I want it to be really balanced. And I'm 1 degree away from Kelsey Warren, the head of Energy Transfer Partners, who put in the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so I was like, okay, I want to sit down with everyone. When I got to Standing Rock after the first day of filming, all but 2 interviews were with women, and those 2 interviews with men were extraordinary. But I felt deep down like this is supposed to be a story about the women. So at the end of the day, Pearl and I sat down, and I said, "Pearl, I think this is supposed to be just the women." And she said, "Duh."
Well, again, the
women, and their unique
defending Mother Earth.
Yeah, and it was women who began this. Okay,
the great feminine. Yeah,
right. So youth and a female youth who was a runner, and that's a whole other topic. But in their tradition, in the Native tradition, there are runners or walkers, and these are people who run or walk as a sacrifice and an honoring for causes or people, and they'll walk across the country or run across the country.
Amazing.
So it was the youth, the Jaslyn Charger and other youth who ran and began it that way. But the original people who took a stand were 5 women out at Standing Rock.
Wow.
April 1st of 2016. By the time September rolled around, September 2016, there were more than 14,000 people out at camp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of amazing filmmakers. And I'll say it again, Myron Dewey and others who were out there, those of us who were there and were there not just for a day,
right,
not for 3 days, because it became then a cool story, but the people who were out there and the Indigenous people who actually lived there and who were always there or for much of their lives were there.
And are still there.
Yeah.
And are still there or have relocated to another place where they can best be of service for the people there. They were out there telling the stories, and no one had started telling it from the perspective of the women. And it's funny, this whole term women of Standing Rock, I've seen it so many places now, and I see handles, hashtags and all that. The Women of Standing Rock was really just made up. We just came up with this title. and it was like, I was thinking what would sound good, what would resonate with people. I was writing an article at the time that ended up in Time magazine, and like, the title End of the Line has a dual meaning. End of the line meaning end of the pipeline and trying to stop the pipeline, and end of the line meaning this is the end of the line, no more.
There was a big metaphor when I read that. I said that's such an incredible metaphor.
My dad actually came up with that. Well, I had flown to Wisconsin on the heels of our first shoot at Standing Rock, when we were going to try a video and crowdfunding, and everybody's like, you can't do crowdfunding. You need to start crowdfunding, months in advance, and you need to do this kind of campaign and whatever. I didn't do it that way. And because of the power of these videos, of what the women were saying in these videos, we started getting donations from around the world, and then attention. And then we started getting grants, writing grants, Pearl and me. And then we had a partner in Finland, Sophia Ehrenruth, who started, you met Sophia, and who started working it from that angle from Scandinavia. And Pearl and I continued here in Hollywood, going to meetings and events and whatever. And the women themselves, we went to Cannes, and they literally got up on stage and took the mic and gave a speech. And we got our first broadcast deal that way.
I would imagine how powerful
it gone the wrong way from the get-go. And it's pretty awesome how it's turned out, and
the reception that it has received.
But you took the chance to go out of the box in something that I don't have to tell you, there was a force propelling you forward.
Oh, absolutely. It had nothing and everything to do with me, right?
Right. It's a force. It's a force. In my opinion, you were driven by morality and humanity.
For sure.
I was going to come with something a little different than that.
Yeah.
You were driven by the wind, as they would say.
Absolutely.
There was something in the wind pushing you
I like
forward.
all of those thoughts. I like all of those thoughts. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there were 3 of us who were out at camp. We had other crews, and we had people who were wonderful and came and helped us. And as we got a little more money, we could bring a few more people and that sort of thing. But Mark Gerke, our director of photography, who ended up becoming a producer on the film and an executive producer, and now has become my life partner 4.5 years after we first started working together.
That's a great story.
Yeah, that's a whole long story in itself. We worked on Standing Rock for 2.5 years. Never any indication of that, because we were focused on the work. After the fact became more than that. And Pearl, Daniel Means, and myself, we were the ones who really held that vision. And Pearl and me, at various times, one of us would be stronger. Most of the time we were both strong. Once in a while we'd be like, should we try it the way they say? Should we try this? Should we do this? One of us would ask that question. Once in a while, when the going got really rough, or when we were dealing with a particularly nasty, threats of violence, or actual people trying to get violent with us or whatever. And always one of us would be like, no, we're sticking to it.
We're sticking to it.
Enough is we always envisioned. And Pearl just passed away actually in May 28th of 2020.
Just passed away?
Pearl also. So we've had a lot of grief in our group in the last year alone, a number of people. But most significantly, in just over a year, we had LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, one of the stars of our film and one of the leaders of the protest, Pearl Daniel Means, and now Lula Red Cloud. But many more than that have passed. Myron Dewey, our amazing brother and drone operator. On and on I could go. We are getting smaller and smaller in number, and it's a bigger and bigger burden for the women who are left, by the way.
But the film exists at the end of the day. This is the whole point. If you did not make that film, they would pass, and there wouldn't be a record you created.
That's why I'm a documentarian. That's why I do the work I do, ultimately, because I believe it matters. And actually at Lula's service on Saturday, one of the chiefs actually said afterwards, and now she's gone, and with her went so much knowledge. And there's no we don't have any of that. And that is true. Every time an elder goes, and it's not been documented, it goes. And though I didn't get as much footage as I had hoped of Lula and all that, I did nonetheless get, I don't know how many dozens of hours of footage. So I did what I could with the limited resources I had. We've agreed now, all of us who, when I made them aware, some of them who weren't aware, that actually I was documenting Lula since 2016. We agreed that because of protocol and because I felt it best and I asked permission, and knowing that 1 year is a significant time, then after 1 year that we should probably release it. 1 year from now, we will be releasing either a feature or a couple of shorts or however it's going to be. We're going to be releasing Lula's story at that time.
I was just, while you were talking, I was thinking that could be very interesting, is documenting Native American elders' wisdom.
That's what I've been doing, actually.
Well, I mean,
individual.
No, I meant as a focus on,
it is one of my focuses. I've been doing that now for in different ways since I was a teenager, actually. So it's on microcassette or whatever, but I've been doing that. I've got thousands, actually, of elders, and not just of North America. And so one of my things that I need to do now, because this was discussed also in the past few days, is now it's time that I need a partner, a major partner.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Me. I hold this footage in various locations in the world, and various very trusted people know where that footage is and how it can be accessed. But there needs to be a home for it. And I need help archiving it and all of that. So that now is one of my main focuses, because when there are thousands of interviews sitting there of elders, spiritual leaders, and holy people of various traditions, that's sacred in itself. And I feel very strongly in the past few days and had discussions about that it's time.
That would be very interesting, the commonality between the different.
There are so many commonalities.
But also the recent people that have crossed over, because maybe now they're in a place where they can help in different ways. So as long as you're open to that, I think you're going to have miraculous things happening.
The right person or persons will be sent to you.
Exactly.
You just put that out into the world.
Universe.
Yeah, it's in the universe now. So
absolutely.
I want to read some of the comments.
Oh, okay. We've had I've been so fascinated with this. But one thing I do want to talk about also, Emmys. I'm an actor, so an Emmy. Oh, that'd be fabulous.
It's a pretty amazing thing.
Evan Lawrence, our good friend, hi, and it says yes vote, because I had on my vote.
A little backstory about Evan Lawrence. He lived for a couple of years on a Native American reservation. I don't know which one. If he's still tuning in, maybe he can write that in the chat. Here. Let's see.
John Barry Humphreys. Well, just 1 second. Skip M says greetings from DC.
Right. Hi, Skip.
Sue, this was made. This mask was made for me by Sue Stutzman from Sue's GX Designs, and she was on. Okay, Evan Lawrence also says it's very important to be connected with your ancient spirituality at this time, so we can hear these messages clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Apollonia Cabrera says, sad, as we were talking about your film, the contents of your film, and Evan says heartbreaking.
Evan, if you're still listening, I need to know what reservation you lived on, if you're still listening in.
And Sue Stutzman also says, wow, so sad and powerful.
Right.
So
and inspiring. I mean, if people watch it,
inspiring.
It's also inspiring. But I acknowledge how difficult it is for people to watch, particularly the people who were actually there, let's say. But it is difficult for everyone to watch. We hear that a lot, like, wow, that was really hard to watch. And I say, good. Pearl and I have always said that and maintained that this is going to be hard to watch. We envisioned, speaking of the Emmys, we envisioned held the vision of ribbon skirts on the Emmy red carpet. And it looked impossible forever that this film would do what it did. And by the way, all of these big visible awards, we've gotten a number of awesome ones like Women in Film and other huge awards. But all of these big visible to the general public, ones have come in the 60 days, within an exact 60-day window of after Pearl transcended as she
That's
was.
amazing, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, again,
Shannon,
I cannot thank you enough for who you are and what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're so in tuned with and focused on this, and you're helping so many, and you're shining a light on things that need to be presented, because again, like in the Western world and with mainstream media, it's whatever sells right now is what they're after. They'll swoop in on something like that because, oh, it's a story, and oh, it's big. And then it's like, oh, look over there. And then they go swooping over here, and not realizing that these people are still suffering. These people are still fighting. These people are
because
still...
it's a news story. It's like, and this one lasted longer than most.
Right.
I guess because of all the drama. You know, you heard about the rubber bullets, you heard about the dogs, and it did keep mushrooming in the news. But how pathetic a society that this happened in 2016. And seriously, if your film weren't hot to trot right now and out there on Peacock and on Fuse, having people watch it, we have to keep the conversation and the awareness going. That's
and hundreds of film festivals around the world that are still requesting it, and hundreds of higher education. So ultimately, awards are awesome. We need awards because awards get public consciousness, and how wonderful anyway to see your work be honored. And the real important thing to me, to Pearl, to Mark, to Sophia, to everybody else, is that this gets in the education system, that this gets into communities.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how amazing it is. Sometimes where I'm at a screening, sometimes now physically at a screening, or sometimes remotely on a panel or whatever it is, and I think, holy shit, that we are in a community where we are. We had one of those, and I won't mention the name. We were in a community a few months ago. Washdewi, one of the stars of the film, Washdewi Young. You also met her, Wendy.
Yes.
We were at an appearance, and I was aware when we were going into that. I know the demographics of that particular community.
Right.
And, you know, standing up there in front of, I think it was 700 people in the audience, and being like, first of all, they got 700 people here in this community for this film. Wow, that speaks to a whole lot of things. But also, you know, it was really powerful to have people stand up. There was one man in particular that I can think about who stood up and he said, I didn't want to like your film, and I didn't want to like you, and I was here for a different reason. And later, this man came up to me, and it turns out he was a roughneck. And he was a roughneck for 35 years. And what a roughneck is a guy who works oil. He works on those rigs. He works on those. He was there to, as he admitted, to be disruptive.
And to debunk and
didn't leave disruptive. And this
you won. You won.
This is what we have to do this for. Is that we find common ground. And that's why I personally do the other types of work that I do, working with governments, working at the highest possible level I can to try to just be a bridge, and to try to get people to sit down and talk and define what is that common ground? Where do we intersect? And it's actually so much easier than one may think to find that common ground. At least it is for me, to figure out what is that common ground, and how can we best reach it as fast as possible and get to some solutions. You know, I understand also, let's speak to oil in itself. I understand that many people have cars that use gasoline, and we have products that use petroleum and all of these things, you know, and so, yeah, we are still a society that's very dependent on oil. And I'm aware also that oil affords people a good job, you know, and people who don't have maybe an education or don't have the ability to go and do other work. And I've interviewed many of people like that. And with my other work, which is I do work, I do documentary work actually for our government too, now, because it's important that I understand all angles of this.
Yeah. Oh my God. Truer words have never been spoken. Yeah. That is the truth. And you know what? The roughneck, the oil guy, that was probably one of the most significant moments that you talked about there, because that is the other side of the coin.
It is. And none of it's easy. These are not easy. You know, though it's easy to find common ground, maybe it's the solution is not necessarily easy. And what I've learned just in my life for me, and maybe this doesn't hold for other people, it holds for me. There is not only such a fine line between good and bad, so to speak, or good and evil, or whatever you want to look at it. I've interviewed murderers. I've interviewed rapists. I've interviewed the very people who abused directly women in my film in the boarding schools. I've done
boarding schools. That's a whole other topic.
We touch on that in this film. You know, it's really easy to just say that person's evil. This is evil. This is bad. This is
right, to put a label.
Yeah.
I want to understand as best as I can, so I can help others understand and maybe help be a small, tiny, maybe insignificant, maybe a little more significant part of a solution. So for us, for me personally, to not, or for my crew, when I say us or we, if we don't talk to the other side, so to speak, and understand where they're coming from, and sometimes, let me tell you, it's not a good place. Sometimes I'm shocked at where they are in a good way. Regardless, to me, for what I do for a living, I want to know all the sides as possible.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people, such as activists, lifelong activists like Phyllis Young in our film, who has been doing this work since before I was born, and who has made contributions to this world, not just this country, but to this world that need to be known and still aren't. And we just
and she sees herself. She's just what I love. She's just getting started.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
I was with her over the weekend too, and other women from this film, and you know, we're all just getting started. And yet Phyllis has, like I said, been doing this work for longer than I've been alive, and she, more than anyone, actually, has been an invaluable mentor, though she didn't like come on board like, hey, I'm going to be your mentor. Me watching her and seeing how she works. Sometimes I'm in a situation where it's really not so easy to be diplomatic, let's say, or where I'm really frustrated, and I think to myself, okay, how would Phyllis handle this? As the great diplomat that she is, how would she handle this? How would Russell Means handle this? How would any of those people that figured out that in order to solve problems, we're going to have to open up dialogue, and we're going to have to at least get in the same room. And let me tell you this, from what I've found as somebody who's been involved in a lot of different careers, a lot of different methods, a lot of different types of media, in fact, for me right now, documentary is the single most effective means. Whether those are documentaries on Facebook, whether those are in theaters, whether they're on TV, or a combination of all of them, other ways. To me, it is the most effective to get people in the same room and on board. And so, yes, it's a powerful medium, and you know, I'll work as many different ways as I can to help the people who are doing the real boots on the ground work and doing that important work that people just need to be aware of. And you know, as Phyllis herself says, you know, whatever gets us a seat at the table, however we best get a seat at the table.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Absolutely. A couple of things. One is, I am so glad that Russell called in the troops. We need to, after the transition,
struck by lightning.
Exactly, that was great, because he put it in helped to put it in motion and move it ahead. The other thing is, change in society, change takes time.
Yes,
there's you touched on like Thanksgiving and a new perspective, a different perspective on Thanksgiving, which thank you for that. And also, but one thing I've noticed was like Columbus Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
The past few years,
look
but
at
it's taken a few years. It was planted.
It really
And a
has.
few years later, now it's Columbus Day, Indigenous Day,
and not so long. It hasn't been that long,
but it's a couple years.
Well, actually,
I
I
also do feel that there is a shift and a rising of consciousness.
There is.
From the Aquarius entering or being an Aquarius. I think that is that hopefully all of these will play a factor into the rising of consciousness for society. So take it away.
And maybe they should add into Thanksgiving, thankful for the Native Americans.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just leave it right there, and that's said at the table.
Because we're on their land. And it was stolen land, and not just that. The teachings that they are bringing forward to the world graciously, despite everything that they're bringing to the table right now about how can we be better to the world? How can we be better to the earth, to ourselves, to one another? Those teachings are going to be increasingly relied upon as part of the solution. And Tim, to touch on something you just said about Columbus Day, that's entwined with Native mascots and all of that topic. But just last night, I have a newspaper, an original newspaper, dated May 3rd, 1972. And that newspaper was an interview with Russell Means, him talking about Columbus Day, him talking about Native mascots.
Wow.
Russell and others, greats like Phyllis Young, who are part of American Indian movement, others who may or may not have been in the American Indian movement, Suzanne Harjo, who has been working in mascots for decades, who's working in Columbus Day, anti-Columbus Day things for decades. Actually, though, to your own point about the media and how we don't know things, we didn't know necessarily. There were newspapers back then. I have one of them that covered this topic that long ago, but it's taken until now. And again, part of that is the power of documentary film. The people who go to these protests, such as Sky Roosevelt Morris, who's in our film, an amazing, extraordinary young woman who is one of the people more than anyone and anything that gives me hope for the future. You know, Sky, since she was a child, was involved because of her family lineage in fighting against Columbus Day, especially in Colorado, and was integral as a young child and as a woman to continuing the work of her ancestors and others who had been doing this work for decades. It didn't just happen. It didn't just begin. And what we think of as new, such as, like, let's say Standing Rock. Standing Rock has had issues on it and major uprisings
for a long time.
Hundreds, and probably is way before then that I'm aware, that I'm not aware of. These things have been happening. And again, the more that we can do things like these interviews, that may seem small or insignificant or whatever, we don't know who might be watching this.
Absolutely.
We don't know who's their own work or their own connections or their own conscience, where that may go as a result. And so it's all important, but we need to acknowledge that this work began before those of us who are on this were here, and it will continue past when we're no longer here in the physical form. And I really honor the people who gave so much, and the people who continue to give so much for things that most of us collectively as a people are still ignorant to, sadly.
Right. Because to me, again, the Western thinking has almost detached themselves from nature. They don't realize the plot of land that they have bought and are building and running water in and making building houses and stuff like this. That ground underneath is still the soil in the ground that the Native Americans it's still the same dirt, it's still the same earth. The water that's flowing down the rivers that they just build bridges and drive over now, that is the same water that was sacred. The same wind that blows is that's all. And we've separated ourselves from nature.
But the biggest part of the problem, what Shannon said about bringing it into education, that's what has to be done.
Yeah,
okay, because the future is in those kids. of tomorrow. The future is in that community that you spoke in front of 700. Those people have children. If films like yours or speakers like yourself or any of the women in that film can get into those schools, there's so much power in that, because kids are impressionable. But if we don't start making it part of the curriculum, if we don't start to teach that, if we don't stop the banning of books and the censorship, it's not going to get out there. We need to be able to get to the kids of tomorrow to make all of this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, thank you for doing just that.
Yeah.
Thank you for again, your contributions are so
Humongous.
wonderful. They are. They're
you.
huge. And we're so grateful, again, under the circumstances too, and with the loss, we again send out our love and light. And we're so grateful for all that you're doing and for you taking the time to come on. I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah, same. Shannon, thank you so much.
Women themselves on your program, and I have other projects that I would love.
We're here, you certainly know where to find me. And I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Nara Garber, who I had connected with your film, your camera person, just another amazing, energy-filled activist who just gets in there, that gets their hands dirty, does the job to send out the message. My God.
Nara is an extraordinary filmmaker and an even more extraordinary human being. And I hope you're on the show.
It's just great. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Shannon Kring.
And
again.
thank you to the women of Standing Rock.
Yes. And to have you back on to talk about other projects that you're working on.
Sounds great. Thank you both so much.
But don't sign off.
Don't sign off. We're going to take a picture.
Okay.
We always do.
Thank you.
Funny that way.
Thank you,
everybody,
for watching If These Walls Could Talk.